Imagine a tree in the heart of a forest. Its branches reach high into the sky, each one unique, yet connected to the same trunk. Below is an intricate network of roots that spread wide and deep, unseen but essential. Now, think of our mental health in the same way. For years, we have focused on the branches. The individual mental health disorders like anxiety, depression, or OCD. But just as the branches of a tree are connected to the same trunk and nourished by the same roots, our mental health disorders stemming from underlying shared foundations. So what if, instead of looking at the branches, we look at the roots that nourish them? So today, I want to invite you on a journey to look at the roots that are nourishing our mental health disorders. We will explore the new way of understanding mental health disorders, one that sees all the branches as connected. This perspective, supported by various data and research, helps us to understand how disorders are connected. We have an evidence-based model that called the hierarchical taxonomy of psychopathology, or hiop, that sees all the branches as connected and looks at the roots which nourishing our mental health disorders. Traditionally, mental health disorders being categorical. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or DSM, and International Classification of Diseases, or ICD, classifies mental health disorders based on its symptoms. A bit like looking at each branch of our tree as if it were a separate tree altogether. But human experiences are rarely so neatly divided. So imagine Sarah, a 28-year-old teacher. Every morning, she's struggling with an overwhelming sense of dread, struggling to get out of bed. A sense of fatigue and worry follows her wherever she goes. And as she prepares for the day and forces herself to smile at the students, she's battling thoughts like, what if I'm not good enough? Or what if everyone sees how exhausted I am? She's not just worried. In social situations, she's anxious, and sometimes she's experiencing panic attacks that leave her breathless, trembling, and worried about when the next panic attack will come again. Maybe some of you know that feeling. Under the current categorical system, Sarah might be diagnosed with major depressive disorder, panic disorder, and social anxiety disorder. But those are free labels, free sets of criteria, and free separate treatment plans. So is that the most accurate way and helpful way how to understand Sarah's experience? Enter hiop, a dimensional model that recognizes mental health disorders on a spectrum, acknowledging both their distinct features and shared foundations. At its core lies the P factor, the general factor of psychopathology, a common root nourishing diverse mental health disorders and feeding them into how we know the categories. So in Sarah's case, that would mean that instead of looking at the disorders, we look at the roots, which would be the general factor of psychopathology, and what is behind that. Under the current categorical system, comorbidity, which is having more than one disorder, is seen as an exception rather than the rule. But comorbidity is common, highlighting the limitations of our current categorical system. On top of that, heterogeneity within diagnosis, which means that two people with the same label can have vastly different symptoms, because one person with depression might have insomnia and weight loss, while another might have excessive sleep and weight gain. And this variability complicates treatments, because therapies targeting one symptom may not target another, even within the same diagnosis. When we view mental health disorders on a spectrum, it acknowledges this complexity. And it allows clinicians to see full range of person's experience rather than limiting them to rigid categories. In my research, I have looked how various personality traits influence the main factor and how they are connecting the roots of our mental health disorders. Traits are not static, they fluctuate. On one side, we have the adaptive ones, such as resilience and high self-perception or empathy. And on the other end, we have the maladaptive ones, such as impulsivity, rigidness, and emotional dysregulation. The hiop model helps us to recognize those traits and look at them, how they are connected to the shared foundations. Or maybe some of them might be even the shared foundations. So, for example, if we look at Sarah again, she might be presenting emotional dysregulation on top of her depressive symptoms, and rigidness and impulsivity on top of her anxiety. In studies involving adolescents and adults, it was found that individuals with high P factor levels, the general factor of psychopathology, our common roots, are at greater risk for a range of psychopathological symptoms. But here is the encouraging part. We can reduce the overall risk by addressing these underlying factors. So let's go back to Sarah. Clinician using the hiop model, instead of treating Sarah's anxiety, panic attacks, and depression specifically, would look at her avoidance behavior and emotional dysregulation and maybe address the negative emotionality. And that would help to target the underlying symptoms. It simplifies treatments because it's more effective targeting all her disorders at one time. And therefore, all her symptoms go down in one treatment. In practice, targeting underlying factors showed improvements across multiple symptom domains. And patients are feeling better overall, not just in one specific area. That means not just in one of their disorders. As mental health providers, we often find ourselves navigating a complex landscape, a maze of symptoms. Imagine having a client who presents various symptoms, such as social anxiety and depressive symptoms. And under the current categorical system, we would use one protocol to target their anxiety and another protocol to target their depression. But for clients, this can feel stigmatizing and quite discouraging. And also, what we do not look at are the comorbid symptoms. That's another thing, because sometimes we categorize them with one disorder, but at the same time, what we do not look is the disorders which we cannot diagnose them, as they are under the category, because they do not fill all the measurements which they need to tick to have that diagnosis. But if we look at the dimensional approach and we address the underlying factors, we address the interconnected emotional processes, and therefore the process is more holistic and integrative. Using the dimension approach helps us to shift away from focusing on a single diagnosis and address the full range of someone's experience. So in Sarah's case, instead of addressing her anxiety, panic disorder, and depression, we would address her underlying factors and put it under one unified protocol, under one unified umbrella. But this way doesn't just change the way we treat people. It also helps us to perceive mental health in a different way. We do not ask what's wrong with this person. Instead, we think of what experiences have shaped them. And that's less stigmatizing because we do not label people. And therefore, we think about mental health more as issues that are a series of personal failings, but more as a person's interconnected parts, which are larger picture than just a disorder. When we view mental health as a spectrum of experiences, we address the whole person. And it helps clinicians to work with greater clarity and confidence. So why does this matter? Because it helps us to have a better diagnosis. By understanding the underlying factors, we can see the risk earlier and address all the comorbid symptoms. We have more effective treatment because we do not look at just one disorder, but at the whole person and all their experiences which they are feeling. We reduce the stigma because we do not give them labels. We look at a person itself and not at their disorders. And therefore we empower patients because they do not feel stigmatized. Viewing mental health on a spectrum helps us to transform the landscape of mental health. Because imagine a world where individuals like Sarah receive care that sees them fully and addresses their whole experience, rather than giving her some label which doesn't feel like herself, but just one part. We all have a role to play, whether as professionals, loved ones, or members of our society. Because if we change the way how we look at mental health, we can make a profound difference in the lives of many. And just as the tree grows stronger when its roots are supported, our mental health system can provide support for individuals when we do not stigmatize them with labels, but we look at what really they experience in their life. We can create a more effective, evidence-based approach that empowers individuals and communities. So we build lasting resilience for everyone in our society. Thank you.